Hey Duelists, it's me, Jared. I'm back from YCS Hartford. I had an absolutely great time. Obviously, we did not do well, unfortunately. I would be jumping out of my chair if I actually managed to win or top. But unfortunately, we didn't do the best. But the event overall was actually a great time. But unfortunately, this format is shit, as you can probably tell from the YCS winner. My deck choice was pretty much influenced by the way he built his deck in a way. My deck was pretty much forced into not being able to be affected by dimensional barrier as little as possible and to be able to still play the game, break boards, and grind game. So I'm going to show you what my deck is, but I'm going to go over the event and some other stuff about the deck choices as I go through them and why I chose to play this deck. So moving forward, the event itself I think was actually very fine. They addressed the water situation that was a problem at YCS Charlotte. And they said, oh, there's like all these food stands right outside in the hallway. Just in the room where you're physically playing, you could not have water or drinking or take your mask off for any reason unless there was any medical condition or anything like that. But overall, I think everything was pretty fair, ran very smoothly. There wasn't any major like round that took over and took way too long. But overall, I think the event was pretty well ran from the judge side and the event staff side. So kudos to you guys. I think you guys did a great job. Now, for the actual format and the gameplay itself, as you probably know, I have not been uploading recently. I've been testing vigorously for this event for the past 3 weeks pretty much. And my testing concluded that this format, one, is fucking awful. There is so many variance cards in this format, and you physically cannot account for all of them. It's literally impossible between things like Mystic Mind, Nibiru, Dimensional Barrier. It is god awful, and then plus like the Despia main deck as well as like burn cards, branded, or not branded, Adventurer package, etc., etc. All these cards are very annoying to deal with up front, and it's very toxic, if I'm being honest. Like there's some things you just can't play around. You can't have your side deck for every scenario. Overall, the format is very frustrating, to say the least, to deal with, and I'm going to see how Splight changes that and Power of the Elements when that comes out. That could make a huge impact, but as of now, I am not going to any events that I know of currently, and moving forward, when I figure out the next event I'll be going to, I'll let you guys know, but as of now, I have no idea what event I'm going to. So anyway, with all of that in mind, the deck that I decided to end up taking was Salamangreat. It was obviously not 3 structure decks, but it was pretty damn close, actually. When I was going through the deck, when I finished it, I was like, wow, this is actually kind of budget with how it ended up. And I did not intend it to be budget. It just, the way that I wanted to build it worked out that way. And I had many variations of this deck that I wanted to try and play. But overall, this was the one that I landed on, which just ended up being a pure build with nothing else in it. I had a build that used more Cybers cards that use Nightmare Corruptor Ibli, because I think that card's pretty crazy right now. It makes your field anti-Nibiru, and that they can't play if you have Sanctuary on the field, so they can't even turn Ibli to attack mode and crash into your guy, because you can make your guy 0. So Nightmare Corruptor Ibli existing on their side of the field means that Despia can't play and Sword Soul can't play. So that would have been cool if I played it, but I didn't, because I couldn't get past a consistency issue with it being a awkward starter and not like a actual Salamangreat starter or something like Flame Buffalo. I also had an adventure version of Salamangreat. That build was fine. It was a higher ceiling, obviously, because you can do more negates, more interruptions, break through more boards. But again, you're sacrificing consistency, and when you're going through a event like this that has many, many rounds, which this tournament was 11 rounds, you need to be able to play the most consistent deck possible so that you can get the best average throughout all those rounds. That's why I chose not to play Brave. I just went with the pure Salamangreat list with just some choices in the main deck to be able to counteract Sword Soul and Despia. So I made it all the way to round, I think it was 8 in day 1. That was where I finally got my 3rd loss. If you were following me on Twitter, you would know that I got a game loss for apparently registering late, but I didn't register late. I pre-registered and then turned in my deck list on Friday and got a game loss because of it. But if I just like normally registered on Friday at the same time and turned my deck list with normal registration instead of pre-reg, I would not have been punished. It's just something that they need to fix. That's actually a complaint I have about the tournament. I completely forgot about that until now. Yeah, please fix that. That makes no sense. I think it's the side deck. please, like, please fix that. That makes no sense. But anyway, moving forward, in my round 1, I did 2-0 him, so the game loss did not affect me. Thank God. And yeah, so now I want to show you guys the deck that I played, the theory behind the cards as I go through it, and why I genuinely still believe that this was the right choice for the event. I know that in the top 32 there was no Salamangreat, but I really do think that Salamangreat does have a place in this format, and I'm going to give you my reasons why. So I'm going to move to the deck list now. Okay, so yeah, here's going to be the deck list. This is going to go through the main deck first. Starting off with the obvious stuff, we have 1 Salamangreat Gazelle, 2 copies of Jack Jaguar, and 1 copy of Falco. These cards were all great. I did like the second copy of Jack Jaguar. I did play Potted Desires, so Jack Jaguar having the second one really did come up. And being able to start with a level 4 actually was pretty good, because you want to be able to end on something like Babushka, which is very, very good in this current format with Despia and Sword Soul. It does lose to certain things, but you can play other things to mitigate what you're losing to, essentially. So overall, I did like these level 4 ratios. Falco definitely came up. I would never cut it, and the 2 Jack Jaguars was fine. If I didn't play Desires, it's definitely cuttable, but because I played Desires, I really did like it. Then we also played Triple Spinny. Spinny is just like the perfect extender. You only need a Salamangreat monster on the field to special summon it. The other effect, to discard and gain 500 attack, never came up, but it being able to be such a free extender was just absolutely crazy. And you want as many 1-card combo pieces as you can, because you need ways to make Heat Soul. Even Jack Jaguar applies to that, where you can go summon Jack Jaguar, make Balinks, get Sanctuary, Sanctuary and Balinks, go Sanctuary Balinks, make another Balinks, and then use Jack Jaguar to bring back itself, shuffling back the other Balinks, go in the Splash Mage, bring back Jack Jaguar again, and then go into Heat Soul. So even if your hand is suboptimal and you only start with Jack Jaguar, you still end with a draw 2, which is very, very important in this deck, because you just need to build. Once you can get your engine going, it just comes down to don't die. If you don't die, you will probably win the game most likely, because this deck will outgrind any like no other. And then the last actual Salamangreat monsters was triple Salamangreat Foxy. Foxy itself was actually insane. The effect to discard and bring back and destroy your face-up spell or trap is crazy. You never really use the first effect anymore. You have to read this card as an extender, not as a consistent piece. So you're not trying to use this to Excavate 3 to try to get the Gazelle anymore. You're really trying to use this as an extender to play through things, or to outspell and trap cards your opponent controls. Things like Branded Lost came up a lot. I also played against Sky Striker and sent away a multi-roll. Things like There Can Only Be One, I used it on. There was a lot of like great utility with this card. And you might think like, oh, you need to Excavate, but a lot of the times you really don't need to, and you'd rather have the extension piece rather than the adding a free card piece. It sounds weird. I know a lot of the times you want to add free cards, but this is one of the few times where when you normal summon this, you might not want to do it and think twice about it. So that's it for the actual Salad monsters. So moving on from them for the generic Cybers monsters, we did play the Flame Buffalo build. Flame Buffalo was really, really good overall. I really liked it. If I played Lady Debug, it would have been getting eaten alive by Impermanences and Veilers because everyone was playing them. So Buffalo was definitely the correct choice here, and I really wouldn't change it because it was, like, this card was just crazy overall. The fact that it's a fire to come back off of Sunlight Wolf came up so many times. The fact that, again, it can dodge Imperm Veiler and make your chain links, and it draws you into your power cards. That's like one of the biggest things. It draws you into your power cards, it draws into your side deck cards. I can't count the many times where I just started with this card, I didn't have any side deck or my power cards in my main deck, and it drew into them later on. So this card was really, really good, and it's so much better. Like, you would think that starting with Lady Debug to get the Gazelle will be better, but I promise you this is better. Like, this plus a Spinny or this plus a Jaguar is just so good. And then following the 3 Buffaloes, we played 3 copies of Parallel Exceed. Again, if I wasn't playing Pot of Desires, I'd be playing 2 of this card. But because we're playing Desires, I want to be able to banish 1 and still resolve it anyway. This is just another card to get to Babushka, but this is also a card that can help OTK your opponent like it's no problem. Like, if you resolve this card, you're probably able to kill them if you have a battle phase that turn, assuming it's not turn 1. But yeah, overall, this card was just really good. Being able to summon level 4 Cybers is amazing, and the fact that it's Wind makes Heat Soul super easy to make. I feel like I don't really need to explain this card too much, but yeah, that was it for the actual Cybers monsters. And then moving forward, we're going to go to our hand trap lineup, which we played triple copies of DD Crow. Crow was okay. I don't think it was great. It was good in my Drytron matchups. I've had, I believe, 2 of them. It was helpful in my Sky Striker matchup by banishing Gage and Ray. So, I mean, this card did come up. It helped in Sword Soul, banishing Ashinas and Vishudas. But yeah, overall, it was okay. I'm not going to say it was great. It was okay. If I drew it against Despia, I would have beat the Despia player if I did not draw this card when I needed to. So, unfortunately, I took the L to Despia. But regardless, I think this was a very good choice. It sucks that it was lost to Mercurier. That was the only downside of this card. But overall, it seemed very, very fine. And I don't know if I play it again. I might switch it out for something else. But for now, for what it is, as a generic hand trap, you can draw off Heat Soul. I think it was definitely worth it. And then after that, we did have 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joy Spring. Of course, it's a very generic hand trap. I'm not going to explain this. It's just the best one, and you can add it back off Sunlight Wolf. And then lastly, we played 3 copies of Effect Veiler. These were just the most generic cards of the format. I also considered playing Infinite Impermanence. The reason I didn't play Imperm was because if I drew off of Heat Soul on my opponent's turn and I drew into Imperm, it wouldn't have an impact like it would if I drew DD Crow. So that was why I chose to play something like Crow over Infinite Impermanence, because if I Heat Souled on my opponent's turn and I drew into Crow, it actually did something as another interruption, unlike Impermanence. Do I think Impermanence is a better hand trap this format? Absolutely, but I definitely think that Crow, for the way this deck is built, with Heat Soul existing, for the interruptions that you can get, this definitely just felt right for this event anyway. Moving forward, we're going to have to switch it up and see where I can take it, but overall I really do like the deck, and I think I'm going to keep playing it for now. Now, that was it for the monsters, so we're going to move on to the spells. So for the basic ones that are very simple, 3 copies of Circle and 1 copies of Sanctuary. This is very standard. It's just Rhoda. The second effect of this card never came up. It always was in my mind, but it never ever came up. And Sanctuary was fine. I drew it one too many times. It was kind of annoying, but I mean, like, you're playing Sal and you have your 1 brick in your deck. It's going to happen eventually. So I know, don't take it to heart, but you know, sometimes you draw Sanctuary and it sucks. And then we played 2 copies of Will. Will was good. It's like the best extender of the deck. It's the Jack of all trades extender. You know, it's a Reborn or like a Soul Charge in a way. And it's definitely really good when it resolves or when it sticks on the field. But I did not want to play 3 of it because if I drew too many, it was awful. Like, having 2 of this card sucks. You really don't want to be pitching something like this off of Salamangreat Foxy, because you would rather be discarding a monster in your hand than this random Will. I know you can use it to use Foxy, pitch in, and add it back with Wolf, but still though, you don't want to be adding back something like this when you can be adding like Roar or Rage. But just drawing 2 cards just makes an immediate dead card in your hand, and that's not something that's good, obviously, and it's not necessary. This should be a bonus, not something you depend on. So yeah, that's why I played 2 Will. At 3, I just found myself working with it more than helping. So overall, the card was insane though. Like, when I saw it, it was just crazy. Then moving forward from here was 3 copies of Sign It Mining. This card is so weird. I actually don't like it that much. I know it gets to Gazelle, and I know how good it is. I just don't know, like, there's some hands where it's just awkward is the best way I could put it, where like you don't have a Salad in hand and you have Mining, and you know you have to get the Gazelle or Buffalo, and it just sucks having this sometimes because there's nothing you want to discard. And I might cut this to 2, I don't know yet, because I don't think the deck functions like it used to. I don't genuinely think you need Gazelle. Obviously it's important to get to Gazelle, but I think the deck can function without Gazelle now. But overall I might cut this down to 2. I'm going to test it out later and see, but for now, at 3, it just gets to the best card of the deck, so I just kind of default had it at 3 without thinking about it. But at the event, there was just some times where it was just too much. And then, obviously, like I said before, I played 2 copies of Pot of Desires. You want to be able to draw as many cards as possible. With more cards in your hand, the more you can play through, the more you can set up. So Desires was really, really good. It also bait out a lot of Ash Blossoms, stuff like that. So, I mean, it's draw 2. It's the best way I could describe it. You know, it's Pot of Greed. And then 2 copies of Forbidden Droplet. I didn't want to play 3 because, again, I didn't want to brick up on it. I also needed the cut down cards for the main deck because this deck is 43 cards. So playing more cards didn't really seem beneficial when I wanted to keep consistency at a good point. So Droplet was fine at 2. When I drew it, it was really good. There was never a time where I didn't have it, and I really wish I had it, surprisingly. But there was times where I actually drew both, and it was annoying. But you just pitch one with the other one, and usually it's fine. But yeah, Droplets is just really, really good. Like, I think in any competitive deck that you play, Droplets should probably in it. I think it's just that good of a card at all times. Like, that attack reduction, the negation, the damage step capabilities, and not being able to respond to it. There's just so much good going for this card that there's, like, nothing else like it in the game. That's it for the spells. We're going to move on for the traps. We played 1 copy of each Salamangreat, Rage, and Roar. This was pretty standard. I really don't know if I'd play Rage again. I might cut this. I know if I cut Rage, I don't play an out to Mystic Mine anymore, which sucks, but like this card just wasn't great. It did get there a few games, like in my Tri-Brigade Zoo matchup. It definitely came up. I was able to pop his Appaloosa. I was able to pop his Tri-Brigade that he normal summon so he can continue comboing. Like it was really like was good, but like I never like found myself sending it with Gazelle to search it. But yeah, and then Roar was just like generically fine. It wasn't anything crazy, but it was able to, you know, stop branded fusion, stop things like evenly match, Harpy's Feather Duster, you know, Lightning Storm, stuff like that. The big power cards this was able to stop, so this was fine. I liked Roar. I never really like Rage only came up like once or twice throughout the day, but Roar was pretty consistent, I would say. And then for the last 2 traps I played, it was 3 copies of Dimensional Barrier in the main deck because this format is so dependent, as you know, from the YCS winner of like certain like summoning mechanics, fusions and synchros specifically. So something like Dimensional Barrier in the main deck makes perfect sense. When you go first and you're drawing cards off Buffalo and Desires and then possibly Heat Soul, you have many ways to try to get to this, and I almost wish I played something like Trap Trick to be able to get to this even more. Like taking these out for 2 Trap Trick almost seems worth it in my brain now that I'm looking back at it. I kind of wish that this was just more copies of D-Barrier because I could be stopping them for an entire turn rather than just once or twice. Also, yeah, like I said, this deck doesn't have an out to Mystic Mine besides this Rage, and like I'm just would accept that at that point and just side for Mystic Mine because the impact that this card is like ridiculous. Even in other matchups that you wouldn't even think of being that great, it was. Like against Drytron, I ended on Sunlight Wolf and Heat Soul, and he went to used Moo Beta. That's what it was. He used Moo Beta on his side of the field to send, and I used D-Barrier called Ritual, and then used Forbidden Droplet to send away the D-Barrier on the Moo Beta, and that negates the Moo Beta. It's too small to attack to make Zeus, and now he can't Ritual Summon. That just like ends his whole turn, because he used like 3 Drytrons already, and this just like shut down everything. It was so good. So like this card for me was like amazing, and there were Sword Soul players who like I feel like I need to describe this because as you know, the Salamangreat board isn't a lot. Like you don't end on a lot. It's not an impressive board with Salamangreat. So you need unfair cards that let you emphasize on what the deck's great at, and the deck is great at recovery, resource management, and grinding. So when you have cards that just say your opponent has to pass their turn and they have to end on mediocrity, you can excel at this, and especially in a deck like this, like a Cybers deck, when you have things like Transcode Talker and Access Code Talker to be able to push through and go for an OTK, it's absolutely amazing. So overall, this was like really good for me. I wish I just played more copies of it, to be honest. And I wish I won more dice rolls. That's the other thing. I did not win enough dice rolls. So that's it for the main deck. 43 cards, like I said. I told you the changes I would make, my reasonings for them. I tested against so much Despia, and against like in all my testing, I played a bunch of Therion decks, like Therion Striker, Therion ABC. I played the other Salad builds. I tried them out. I tried Despia. I tried Sword Soul. I just didn't like them because they get blown out by D-Barrier. So I wanted to play something that didn't get blown out by D-Barrier. So that's how I found myself playing this. So now moving forward to the extra deck. Sorry, this is a little unorganized. We played, for Link 1s, we played 2 copies of Phalanx. I know a lot of people play 3, but I played 2 because I wanted more like resources in the extra deck for later in the game, and one of those resources was 1 Salamangreat Amirage. Amirage did come up multiple times. This is a card I do not see in Salamangreat list right now, but they play Lingaribo. I understand the purpose of Lingaribo. I understand that it is good against evenly matched, and that is a dark monster to make so you can make Heat Soul easier. But Almirage is so good on turning your hand traps, like I said, Ash, Veiler, and DD Crow, into a Salamangreat monster so that you can revive back something like Spinny and bring back something like Jack Jaguar and still make a Sunlight Wolf, and then to keep comboing. And like your hand trap plus Parallel Exceed can still make a Heat Soul, or it can still make Babushka. There's just so many good implications of playing Amirage that like your awkward hands just don't suck anymore. Like, so when you have a hand trap and you have Parallel Exceed, this allows you to be able to keep playing, like I said. This makes a huge difference in those awkward hands. Yeah, so moving forward, we're going to go to Link 2s. We played the obvious triple copies of Sunlight Wolf. This is your resource management card. I went through 3 copies all the time. I'm not going to go into too depth about this. It's just pretty straightforward overall. And then for other Link 2s, we played 1 Splash Mage. I want to play 2 of this card so bad because it's so good, but there's just no room, and I cannot find room for this card. And I wanted to play Lingaribo too, but I just don't have room. But Splash Mage was absolutely amazing. It was an incredible card. It always came up, and like, I made it, I feel like, every game. And then Update Janitor for the last Link 2. This is just for your OTK, which people apparently do not do correctly in this deck, and I was able to punish so many people with Update Jammer and Access Code and Transcode because, like, I guess people just don't know how to play against Salamangreat anymore. They just forget. So when I'm comboing, I can do some degenerate things with things like Update Jammer, Transcode, and etc., and I'll explain them when I get to them. And as like I said, we're going to go to Link 3s. As I said, I played the 1 copy of Decode Talker Heat Soul. This card was really good. Like, it wasn't like phenomenal, it was just another thing to end on, but it did draw into stuff like D-Barrier. It did draw into my side deck pieces that made huge differences. So this card overall was really good. It gives you something to end on when your hand's just weak, and that makes all the difference because you get to draw 2 cards from it guaranteed pretty much, and you can just set up anything with it. It's like you just draw, like the advantage you get from this is ridiculous, and it sets perfectly up in the Access Code Talker. So this card was an absolute staple in this deck in my opinion. It was so good. For other Link 3s that I played the 1 copy of Transcode Talker. Like I said, this was something for Update Janitor to go into Transcode Talker, and then that can also go into Access Code Talker for an OTK. And then when I get to Access Code, I want to explain a little bit of why this was so much better than I guess how other people play it. But I want to talk about the last Link 3 I played, which was actually 2 copies of Heat Leo still. I know online and YouTube, when I was doing my research on this deck, most people cut these, and this is where Lingaribo comes in, this is where an extra Splash Mage comes in, this is where other cards come in. But Heat Leo was so good. Like, I cannot stress enough that if you don't play these, your deck has no pressure. So, and what I mean by that is, when I say no pressure, like, if they have a set Forbidden Droplet, you can't beat it. Like, you're not killing them. Like, you could D-Barrier them, and then they, like, set a card and pass, and then if that one set card is a Forbidden Droplet, you're not beating them. You can't win. You need, this card applies pressure, and that's what you need. You need board presence and clearance. So when you go into Heat Leo, and you shuffle away their back row, and then you link off Heat Leo for Heat Leo, when you turn their guys small, that applies pressure, and it baits things out that you can set up for Access Code Talker. So I don't never understand how the list didn't play this card, but it was so good. I really like this card. I would probably never take it out because it was just, like, for me on the weekend, it helped so much having this in my extra deck, and I was able to clear so much. Like, so many people were playing Droplets and Imperm, and I even played against a guy playing Chalice, and like any rogue matchup just sets like 1 or 2 back row, like, you can clear it without having to dedicate your Access Code Talker and have it be threatened. You can clear them before you get to your vocal point to go for the OTK. So this card was absolutely crazy, and I just could not recommend it enough. And then for the 1 Ring 4, obviously, it was the 1 Access Code Talker. So with Access Code Talker, as you know, you can go Update Jammer, link off Update Jammer in the Transcode, and then Transcode, you bring back the Update Jammer, and then you link off an Access Code Talker. That's like the standard that I feel like everybody knows. But the thing is, with this build, is when you're playing, you need to be able to, play through hand traps. You can't just, or other interruptions. You can't just, YOLO your way into like an Access Code Talker and then just run into an Imperm or a Veiler. It happens so much, and there's got to be, you just need a way of beating it. And the way you beat it is, let's say you D-Barrier them. So you set up your board, then you D-Barrier them. It's like, okay, how do you kill them? Because you didn't really stop them. They're gonna save their interruptions for Access Code Talker. So what happens is, whether you have a Sunlight Wolf or a Balinx up top, let's say they cleared it, you have Balinx or Sunlight Wolf up top. We'll say Sunlight Wolf just for this, just for the sake of this argument. So you have Sunlight Wolf here. You can bring back something like Jack Jaguar and Spinny, and then link those off into the Update Jammer. Once you're here, you can use Update Jammer and something like Foxy in your graveyard, or a Gazelle that you normal summon, or anything like that, or Special Gazelle when you make this, and then so let's say you have Update Jammer Gazelle after making this. and then you link those off into your Transcode Talker under here. Now, because this is here, they cannot target Sunlight Wolf, or they can't target Transcode Talker. So if they have Imperm or Veiler, they're not stopping you, and they haven't been able to stop you yet from going for the OTK. Now you can use Transcode Talker to bring back Update Jammer. Keep in mind, Transcode Talker can attack twice too. So you bring back the Update Jammer, and then you use the Sunlight Wolf, and don't forget to use the effects of this too. You still get a monster back, and you still get a spell back for this too. So just in case this fails, you still have a board. Then you link off the Update Jammer and the Sunlight Wolf for the Access Code Talker here. Now both of these are plus 500 attack and cannot be targeted, and can both attack twice. And this has plenty of pops usually. You can use Splash Mage earlier if you made Heat Soul. You could force a Splash Mage in the combo as well. Like, there's so many ways to do it, but you can guarantee 2 pops and 2 guys attacking directly that are huge. And the reason this is so relevant is because there was so many times that people held on to Effect Veilers and Infinite Impermanences because, again, they're so heavily played right now. And Widow Anchors. Widow Anchor was another one. They just cannot beat this. This was unbeatable. This just killed so many people through having multiple Veilers in hand, multiple Imperms, things like Widow Anchor, etc., etc. Like, it was so huge that this could not be beaten. Things like D-Barrier this didn't care about. Like, there's so many things that this was just so good against. So if you're doing the OTK play, please do not just use transcode and just link it off for access code and just try to be greedy. It is fine if this is at 4,800 attacking twice. That's still lethal, and you have this attacking twice, which clears most things anyway. And then you could just use access code to clear off any extra back row or any extra monsters you can't kill. And this is just plenty of damage. So just please do the OTK like that. I'm so tired of people just like playing into things for no reason, because all of your opponents who play against Salamangreat, they do not respect this card, and they are waiting for Access Code Talker to hit with Imperm or Veiler, and you will be punished for it every time when you just didn't have to be. Now, for the last 2 cards of the extra deck, it was pretty standard. My last 2 Exceed monsters was just Stalio and Babushka. Stalio is pretty standard. I'm not going to play more than 1 because you never need it. This was also the only card in my deck that got hit with Dimensional Barrier. So, like, it was whatever, because a lot of times they have D-Barrier. They D-Barrier me when I make this, but I made this, and I would have Balinks up top, and then I would just link them both for Sunlight Wolf anyway, and then use Stalio to bounce away their card anyway, and it still did its job. Like, I don't care most of the time about the special summon effect. Sir, I don't get Sunlight Wolf's add back sometimes, but regardless, the bounce going second is so good. And then Babushka is just really good this format. Yes, it loses to things like Imperm, it loses to things like Droplets, it loses to things like Vishuda, but if you say have it or you lose, like, this can just steal a game. Or if they have Vishuda and they go Vishuda, link off into Monk, and then you can just TD Crow it right on the spot, and then this is still sticking, they just cannot deal with this card, and it makes them play so poorly for no reason. Well, not for no reason, but for, like, the good reason, because it's so good. And again, like I said, against Despia, this is really, really good too. It's just a really good card, this format, and I cannot stress that enough. There was times where I ended on it and it just won the game by itself, but like I said, it's a YCS, so there's a lot of diversity. There was times I ended on it and I was playing against Striker, and then it just didn't do anything because it's it's this thing. It doesn't do anything against Link monsters. So that was it for the extra deck. I hope I explained everything well enough for you guys to understand from a competitive level of why I chose this deck. Pretty much, I feel like that was the full explanation of why I chose the deck. Now for the side deck, this is more for the meta, not really for like why I chose the deck, obviously. 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird. I think this is pretty standard. This is normal. Droll and Lockbird's like really important for some decks where they just don't stop, like the Punk decks and stuff like that. There's just a lot of times Droll and Lockbird's just really, really good. I'm not going to dive too much into that. It's just an absolutely insane card and stopping crazy decks like Drytron and whatnot. And then for the other hand trap that I play in the side deck was Nibiru. This is for Sword Soul, obviously, or mirror matches, or anything other random decks that could be going combo heavy. Nibiru was really good. I used it multiple times in the event. It was so good. I don't think I'd ever cut this card as in the current state of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because of just how utterly strong this card is. I think it's so strong right now. Just to have in your side deck at a minimum for when you get into those matchups, just to just have it ready. And then for my anti-back row decks, I played 3 copies of Twin Twister. Twin Twister was great. It was generic spell and trap removal. That's all it was. Nothing really else to it. I picked Twin because I wanted to discard. I actually like discarding in this deck sometimes, and hitting 2 cards is better than hitting 1 card, because it's just, if you're playing something I want to twin, there's probably 2 things I want to twin to get more value out of it. So overall, this card was fine. And then my other anti-back row deck was 3 copies of Anti-Magic Arrows. This card I never used. And all my matchups was no super heavy back row Elwich decks or anything like that. So this card never got sided in. I was ready for it, but it never happened. The only Elwich deck I played was branded Elwich, and he just played Floodgates, like, right off the rip. Like, Necro World Banshee, and there can only be one, and, you know, it's just... That was it. I couldn't do anything. It was just all, like, Floodgate type cards that were already face up, and this didn't kill anything. I sided it in, and then he just played branded cards, and I just lost. So, I mean, it was just an unfortunate game. It felt very, like, one-sided, but I couldn't really do anything. So, it happens. That's Yu-Gi-Oh! But overall, like, the theory behind this card was that against those decks, you're going to assume that they're going to assume, if you say battle phase, that you have even weight match. In the beginning of the battle phase, you have first action, you anti-magic arrows them. That should turn off their entire board. And then past that, you can go into something like either Heat Leo, or you can go into Access Code Talker to clear all of their back row. And then you are just in such a demanding position at that point because you turned off everything and cleared everything. So that's just the theory behind it. Overall, it was fine. But, like, the theory behind it was fine, I mean. But in practice, it didn't come up, unfortunately. And then lastly was 3 copies of Anti-Spell Fragrance. This card, it was so good against Branded and against everything going first because this card is broken. It is, like, almost a Imperial Order. Almost. Not as good as Imperial Order, but it, like, almost accomplishes the same thing. You flip it, and then you don't have to worry about spell cards anymore. It's really stupid. That's, like, not fair. It's the same reason Imperial Order was, like, annoying. You just don't worry about spells all of a sudden. It's like you don't have to worry about Lightning Storms. That's so good. Or Branded Fusion. Or Branded the Red. Or all that. So, and in this deck especially, you're either A, OTKing them the following turn if this resolves, or B, you're clearing their back row with Access Code or Heat Leo. Because your Sanctuary is already there. So you're just clearing everything regardless. So this card's very degenerate, and you should just have it in your side deck no matter what deck you're playing, I feel like. Because it's that good. So overall, I hope you guys enjoyed the Salamangreat deck I played. Hope you enjoyed the explanations. I know I, like, poured all this information out to you at once, but that is what 3 weeks of testing does, and very disappointingly not being able to play the decks that you thought you were going to play, and then end up changing it to this last minute because of just how testing was going for you. But I hope you guys enjoy nevertheless. I hope to see you soon. I am going to be heavily grinding on Dueling Book, most likely, because I don't see why I wouldn't. That's just something I been doing. And yeah, so keep up with me on that. Follow me on Twitch, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.